Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to you all. Thank you for joining us for this webinar, Beyond the Comfort Zone, Building Young People's Confidence Through Challenge. And for those of you who are new to Parentkind, we are the UK's largest parent charity, and our mission is to support parents as they guide their children through their education journey and beyond. So we are passionate about representing parent voices and championing the role of parents in education, working with schools, parents and policymakers to support every child to thrive and reach their potential. So a few things before I pass over to today's facilitator. Towards the end of the webinar, there will be a short poll, and we'd be really grateful if you completed this, as it really helps us with future planning. And in terms of questions, please do feel free to pop any questions you have in the Q&A function at the bottom, and we will do our best to answer these at the end. Finally, we often receive questions about the slides, and while we won't be sharing all of the slides with you, you will receive a follow-up email with useful links and resources in the next few days, and this will include our Ultimate Summer Adventure Pack for parents, and we'll share a link to the digital version of the pack in the chat shortly. And just to note that this will be updated to include the recording of today's session by the end of the week. So without further ado, I'm delighted to be joined today by Dr. John Allan, Head of Impact and Breakthrough Learning at PGL Beyond, B Corp, the UK's largest provider of adventure education. He is an educator and outdoor practitioner, as well as a visiting fellow at Sheffield Hallam University. John's area of expertise centres on positive psychology, strength-based learning and resilience building. His research outputs have included international and national journal publications, book chapters, keynote addresses, conference symposiums, presentations, and online teaching and learning packages, and we're really delighted to have him with us tonight. So with all of that said, I will now pass over to you, John.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Lisa. So, as Lisa said, I'm John Allan. I'm Head of Impact and Breakthrough Learning at PGL Beyond and a visiting Professor of Education at Sheffield Hallam. Thank you so much for the opportunity for me to speak to you this evening about my passion and about my role within adventure education. It's my passion. I'm an established university academic. I've been in academia for 25 years. Specialising, as Lisa said, in positive psychology, and I'll explain what that means as we work our way through the presentation. So my background and what we're going to be discussed today is all interlinked, because my passion, my research, I suppose, as an educational psychologist, I'm very interested in more contemporary issues that are surrounding young people today, and this notion of what we call personal growth, and broadening this idea of a comfort zone. And we'll explain what comfort zones are, the fact that outdoor learning actually helps us develop more healthy, confident young people by broadening their horizons or broadening their comfort zones, and why summer and why light nights and why adventure and the outdoors and nature is such a positive conduit for bringing about behavioural change and building adaptive capabilities in young people so that they can meet challenges of today with confidence, that enhances their well-being and enables them to undertake challenges more so than ever before. And it's really important that we actually understand some of the basic psychology behind how outdoor education builds resilience, and we'll talk about resilience in young people. So that's what we're going to talk about. Just to give you a little bit of context, my background's in, as I've said, positive psychology. What is positive psychology? It's this notion of using behavior, understanding how our emotions are created, understanding our capabilities in adversity, understanding how we deal with and understand challenge in a positive way, rather than seeing it as a deficit, rather than seeing it as something that we want to avoid. And the outdoors is, as I've mentioned, is a positive, what we call conduit or mechanism for change, because the outdoors is a very unpredictable and non-uniform environment that stimulates and creates positive growth. And we know that through lots of research that I've been involved with over the years. So that's sort of the background, and some of these textbooks here I've contributed to. And what we consider the outdoors to be is what we call a bio, so body, psycho, mind, social, connectiveness phenomenon. So it's holistic education is what I'm going to be talking about today. Holistic education means whole body education. And some of the research that I've been involved with over the years has ranged from working with lots of different school groups, lots of different educational groups, some of those groups with marginalised populations, with kids that are really struggling. And arguably, quite a few young people today are struggling in terms of health and well-being. And I've worked in a more performative environment as well, helping mountaineers climb some of the highest peaks in the world. The principles of this sort of can-do solutions-focused behaviour is the same if you're a child making a transition from year 6 to year 7 as it is trying to climb the highest mountain. These principles remain the same. It's about undertaking this can-do philosophy. And what we're trying to do within our lives is enable young people, especially within our environment at PGL and within my research that I undertake across lots of different population groups, is enabling young people to thrive, moving them and shifting them along a continuum. A continuum is like a line of extremes from at one end where they're just hanging on and surviving to shifting along this trajectory, this journey to something where they can feel in control, confident, and thrive and fulfill their potential. So why now, you might ask? Why is it important that we talk about this now? We need to know that young people are struggling. And I'll come on in a moment with some statistics that are quite alarming, really, in terms of the challenge that are facing children and young people today. And we know that physical activity is on the decline. We need to try and get young people more engaged within their physical environment, within the social settings in which they operate, within education, and within a more connected communities. It's more important than ever before, I feel, that children and young people need to be exposed to adventures or education that actually stimulates and promotes growth. So the challenges that are facing youngsters today encompass poor mental health, rising youth unemployment. There is a widening gap in terms of inequality within society, and there has been systemic failures in health and education that are pointing towards that we're failing young people. So, for example, there's 1 in 5 children and young people aged, between the ages of 18 to 25 years of age that are suffering from poor mental health. You can times that by 4 for those that come from disadvantaged households. 80% of adult mental health problems begin in childhood. So we really need to make sure that we're hitting the mark in trying to identify and eradicate mental health problems in order for them to not cascade continuously into adulthood. Rising youth unemployment. We've got a generation of over 1 million young people at the moment who are unemployed. And are finding it very difficult to make the transition into working life and into adulthood. They call them NEETs. It's quite an awful word, but it means not in education, employment, or training. And so we're really trying to, or need to try and address some of their problems. We've got probably 1 in 10 children at the moment who are in consistent poverty with poor parenting. And as I've said, we've got these issues within health and education that are not really doing children a service. We in education seem to be obsessed with exams, seem to be obsessed with more reductive education rather than more holistic, health-based educational experiences. So the government at the moment have changed the curriculum entirely, which is going to come in 2017, where they're going to be emphasising more on vocational skill development, enrichment activities that schools and parents can actively get involved with. And I suppose that's where PGL will probably hit its mark insofar as trying to bring about some of these very positive experiences within schools. So again, issues that are affecting young people today, things like literacy. We all know the issues surrounding the ban and social media, or the potential ban for social media, but we do know that the average person now spends over 7 hours a day staring at a screen. For Gen Z young people, the figure is more like 9 hours. So we know there's a significant problem here. And that has impacted on literacy levels. And the fact that it's impacting on reading, writing, is really worrying when it comes to the dawn of AI and the dawn of trying to get young people to be able to understand what skill sets are needed to get into the workplace and maintain that sort of degree of employability. So we know that students and young people within an educational setting now are going to be faced with significant challenges with the dawn of social media changes and the rise of AI. So we need to be in that space, but not in that space that it detracts away from our whole holistic development of education and health-related skill sets. So my background, as was introduced at the beginning, is in this area of positive psychology. And one of the terms that is used interchangeably within society at the moment and seems to be always in the news is this notion of resilience. And I've been looking at this topic now for best part of 20 years, well before it became very popular. But what resilience is this range of capabilities that I feel young people need to develop within childhood. It enables them to be able to deal with adversity, bounce back from challenges that maybe knock them off their what we call their equilibrium or their balance, and be able to bounce back and deal with things that come along that are going to test them. It's this ability to be able to adapt to new circumstances, and it's very significant for wider learning. It underpins our confidence. It underpins our ability to believe in ourselves and our capability, and it's crucial. And more so than ever before, education and employers are looking for resilient young people. Those young people that can handle challenges, achieve goals, and create this sort of inner assurance and trust in yourself, free from this sort of overwhelming self-doubt that might permeate amongst our young people of today. And this capability, this overarching set of skill sets, is what I'm mainly going to concentrate on tonight. So what is resilience? It's a toolkit. You could argue that it's a toolkit of resources that are linked to mental health. It's not synonymous with mental health. It doesn't mean that if you're resilient, you're going to be healthy mentally, but it does have this strong connection to it and connection to well-being. It involves our physical state. It involves what we call our cognitive state, or our thinking capability, our emotional strength, having to deal with and understand stress and how we can manage stress in a manageable way. And also the social connectedness that we have with other people. In fact, resilience is something that is catching. It's something that we learn. It's something that we model in others. It's something that we can then pass on to other people. So it's not a set of traits that are stuck with us. It's something that we learn and develop over time. So it's more like a journey. And I've just been reading this book. The reason I put this little sign in the corner there, this book called 438 Days, this unbelievable journey this guy went on of survival. And he said survival is not passive, it's active. One of the things that you do in life is embrace risk. If you never fall on your face, nothing happens. So when something big happens, you're totally unprepared. You have no toolkit. This guy spent 438 days at sea and survived. And it's quite an incredible story of human endurance. And the notion of resilience comes from these extraordinary human endeavors. But what many psychologists suggest today is that resilience is ordinary magic that we have in each of us, and we can each pull on quite significant resources when we need to. So you could argue that by building these resources, this toolkit, we're building a resilient brain, and we're able to protect ourselves from stress and deal with things that come along that are unexpected, because our brain is the center of everything that we do, and our brain is something that we can develop and grow like a muscle. It's not something that is finite. It is infinite. The amount of changes that we can develop through behaviors that matter to us can change the whole architecture of our brain. We now know that. And this is something that we need to be telling young people, is that by working through collaboration, through effort-driven behavior, we change the circuitry of our brain. We can rewire our brain to become more resilient and deal with challenges when they come along. So I'm just giving you some context here for the science. The outdoors is going to come in very shortly, don't worry. So when I was asked to put this presentation together, it was about this notion of confidence. It's about this idea of becoming capable and believing in our own capabilities. And as I said earlier on, resilience, this notion of being adaptable, needs to be built in order for us to become confident across different situations. Confidence is something that is our self-belief across different contexts of learning. And quite a lot of this confidence is built early in childhood. And if we can get young kids early, we can try and prevent mental health problems cascading into a situation where they become unmanageable. And we try and build this capability to adapt to new circumstances to protect ourselves. Now, the language of resilience is everywhere. And you can see it in lots of different textbooks. You can see it through lots of different areas of education. Some people call it growth mindset. Some people call it what Laura Janner talks about within this book here, called key skills, or QI skills, or key skills. I would advise anyone who's got very young children who are preschool and even into primary school to look at some of this material. It's really, really interesting. And they put these resilient skill sets within user-friendly language. So, for example, me, we, why, will, wiggle, wobble, and what if. These key skills are really important for children to develop. And some primary school organizations now are actually using some of these, what we call key skills, within what they deliver. So this is just really not, I'm not promoting this as something that I will personally benefit from. It's something that I highly recommend you read. Also, this idea, you've probably heard of this before as well. Some of you may have come across this in school. This idea that we're trying to develop a growth mindset in our young people now. And you can see the difference between someone who's fixed and avoids challenges, as opposed to someone who has more of a growth perspective of their own capabilities, views challenges as opportunities for growth. So again, you may come across this language within the educational settings that you find yourself. I certainly know that they develop these sorts of exercises with primary school children within school. So learning through growing, through failing, inspired by others, believing that talent is ever improving, that by putting effort in, you're always going to you're always going to grow. I'm going to put more flesh on the bones, but I just thought it may be, some of this material may be familiar to you already. So, before we get to the sort of how we build resilience through the outdoors, I think it's important that we get to understand that this time of year is crucial. Well, any time of year is crucial for getting outside and doing something different, but continue learning during the school holidays is really important, that we don't just switch off. We don't just think education is about a classroom, or education is even about learning outside the classroom. It's continuous learning. Our ability to become resilient never stops. It happens through experiential learning, by doing something that is different, by challenging ourselves continuously, by enabling ourselves to take on new challenges and new opportunities, and always making sure that any opportunity is an opportunity for developing growth. And that when we have time to fill, there's always opportunity to build and develop throughout the school holidays. Most of my learning when I was a child took place within the school holidays. It was this opportunity to just take the shackles off, think about some of the great things that you could do in collaboration with your parents, with your wider community, with your friends. It's just a brilliant opportunity for developing all sorts of different skill sets that you wouldn't get within a more restricted, reductive educational system. So we definitely know through all the research that I've done and with colleagues over the years that nature and outdoor experiences support psychological health and well-being. Just being outside for 5 minutes gives you a mood lift. We know that human connection to nature has declined significantly. We know that a third of children don't even play outdoors after school now. We know that the outdoors for all is something that is actively promoted by the government and actively promoted through research endeavours. We have been at PGL been actively involved in research now that is showing the benefits associated with the outdoors. But it's not just proving this through all sorts of psychometric testing or looking at the impact that it's having on health, education, well-being. It's about understanding the mechanisms of change so that we can replicate and make the most of what we do when we're outside. At PGL at the moment, we've built what's called the Skills for Life program, and you can see that end image there. That is a journal that we are developing at the moment with young people coming and accessing our residential programs. And our residential programs run from young people starting at year 3 and year 4 all the way through to year 9, 10 and 11 and beyond that. And we're even now running programs within universities built on the same principles of building expansive skill sets for young people that will help them navigate their way through education and the challenges they're going to find in everyday life. And why do we know that this works? Because, as I said earlier on, our brains are wired through hands-on interaction with the physical world. We know that we learn better in multi-sensory environments. We know that we taste, we touch, we feel, we share. All these emotional experiences are dynamic and memorable and stimulate the hippocampus in the brain to make sure that this material is retained. We know that unisensory or single sensory environments, like many classrooms, are actually not that effective in terms of retention of information. We know that we learn best by doing and exploring. And that sort of first-hand learning or experiential learning is where I suppose this idea of a comfort zone comes from. I mentioned it at the beginning. And this idea of a comfort zone is about broadening where we feel we belong, or where we feel happy, or where we feel content. And everyone can stay in that area. It's something that can stay with us for a long time. The ability to be able to stretch and push ourselves into areas that are probably unfamiliar to us is where things will happen that we will probably least expect it to happen. We can stagnate in an environment of comfort where we might have low challenge and might have little support to push us into area of stretch. We need to be in areas of stretch and challenge in order for us to pursue this notion of doing something that is different, that is unique, that will test our capabilities in uncertainty. We don't want to go outside of that challenge perspective into a negative environment or what we can consider to be misadventure, you could call it, because that's as detrimental to our development as it is staying in our comfort zone. And it's really difficult sometimes to argue and understand where people's comfort zones are without actually just speaking to young people and asking them and testing them and challenging them by choice. And I suppose the next slide shows us how we can do that. So when we talk about this sort of idea of a comfort zone, you could argue we are in a situation on the left-hand side here where we have this graph where we have challenge and support, where we have this sort of idea of low challenge and low support. We are in that lower quadrant, which is, say, stagnant environment, where we're not moving, we're not going anywhere. Where we have low challenge and high support, we may be comfortable because obviously people are helping us, they're giving us feedback, they're looking after us, they're making sure that our challenges are within our own grasp. When we go into this idea of high challenge and low support, we're going into this, what we consider to be this unrelenting environment, this environment which is probably misadventure or something that will test us beyond our capability. So we're trying to get ourselves in a situation where we've got high challenge, but also high support. The outdoors and adventure education many, many years ago used to be seen as pushing people into areas that they felt uncomfortable in, and they would have to probably deal with it within their own way. And that this idea of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger is a bit of a fallacy. It's something that is probably not where we would consider to be now. We need to promote high challenge and high support and be facilitative in what we do. So this idea behind maintaining a balance is where we're at between challenge and support. And you can see our little weighing scales here that we've got on the right-hand side. And our idea of balance is really important in order for us to push ourselves in a way that won't tip us over the edge, but also won't give us that overarching comfort where we don't want to move. So we've got to get this idea behind having positive support, but also a degree of feeling uncomfortable in some respects, because by feeling uncomfortable, it pushes us into that stretch area. And that's really important. Now, these two words that you can see on the weighing scales called BDNF and cortisol is actually our brain. These are brain chemicals within what we have naturally within our brain. And we've got something called BDNF, and it's protein. And when we exercise and when we go outside, this protein actually promotes growth of brain tissue or brain cells that enable us to take on more information. If we have too much of it, though, it becomes complacent and it runs out. What we need to counterbalance that is something called stress hormone or cortisol, which in large amounts is really, really problematic. It brings on stress. So without going into too much detail, we need a balance between good experiences, bad experiences that bring about good protein to grow brain tissue, but also we need some degree of stress, which is manageable, but promotes this sort of stealing effect or this stimulation for growth. I hope that makes some degree of sense. So, how do we build resilience and confidence then? We need this balance. We need starting small and building up. We need to build confidence by taking on challenges that are not too difficult, that's going to push us into an area that we feel as though we can't succeed. We don't want to be too much looking at other people. We want to be comparing ourselves to what we can do and what we can do in relation to the support from other people. It's about gradual familiarity and then building this capability to take on new challenges, working towards what we call self-determination or independence. And what I'm going to talk about now is I'm going to use the letters of resilience and come up with some practical tips of how we can try and create this sort of balanced understanding of ourselves and understanding of our young people in adversity. So resilience, the word, is going to be taken, and we're going to just look at some particular bullet points that reflect what resilience is and how we can actually use this concept in a more practical setting. So R, rebound and reinvent. We learn to bounce back from setbacks by taking risks and having the freedom to fail. We really do need to do that with youngsters. We need to make sure that they don't feel as though by failure, that is it. We need to make sure that they continuously embrace the fact that no people would ever get anywhere or learn anything without actually having to deal with setbacks and taking responsibility for their own actions. And when we're in the outdoors as an outdoor practitioner, we don't jump in too early and give away the answers to problems. We make sure that we enable perseverance and effort, because by enabling youngsters to take responsibility for dealing with or coming up with solutions to problems, it makes that feeling of confidence in their own ability much stronger. Energize, provide supportive, constructive feedback. Now, this idea of 3 to 1, the reason I put 3 to 1 there is that in order to build a can-do attitude and build this, what we call effort-driven behavior, it's really important that we give constructive feedback, obviously, and we give lots of positive feedback to what young people can do, but also don't shy away from giving and enabling young people to feel a degree of negativity. And most psychologists, worth their worth in positive psychologists, talk about the fact that we need at least 3 positive emotional experiences counterbalanced by 1 negative experience in order to get optimal or ideal growth. If we give too much positivity, we get complacency. If we give too much negativity, we get people taking the bat home, not wanting to do it anymore. Again, it's this idea of this balance between BDNF, this protein, and cortisol. So there's a biological imperative behind the behaviors that we encourage through our feedback as a parent or as an educator or as a psychologist. Sharing, really important within adventure education programs. It's probably, for me, is one of the most important things. This idea of taking part with others within activities that give us this sort of frisson, or you could frisson of danger, this perception of danger. It enables us to understand empathy, take turns, patience, have the confidence to ask for help. It's a sign of strength. Resilience, as I said, is catching. It provides opportunities for children to model good behavior and enable it to grow in others around them. Just looking at my time at the moment. Okay. Inquisitiveness, one of the most important things, I think, that primary school children have, and then for some reason it seems to be taught out of them when they get to secondary school. This idea that we question everything, the how, the what, the who, the when, the why. These questions are so important. The question, the key QI skills, or the key skills I mentioned earlier on that they teach in primary, that some primary school teachers are now using. These are the key I skills, or the QI skills, that are really important. This idea of being able to wiggle and wobble and ask questions, it demonstrates curiosity that will help young people come up with effective solutions and problems they will encounter. Resilience built through adventure education can transfer across different contexts if you allow it to, and if you enable that understanding to be solidified. Life enhancing. To transfer positive behavior into everyday life, make the experience memorable, make them funny, make them mildly apprehensive. Humor and apprehension go together. You might think that's counterintuitive, but it isn't. Sometimes when we're in these dangerous or perceived dangerous situations, we find it quite hilarious after the event. And when we've got our young people on the leap of faith, or lots of different activities that I've taken part, had young people take part in over the years, they will see and they'll benefit from the use of humor within situations where they feel mildly apprehensive. Everyone is unique. We need to make sure that we understand that fact. The fact that I'm talking about generic sort of ideas here, or general ideas like comfort zones, like pushing ourselves beyond boundaries, like balance, within that, everybody is unique. Everybody will have their different tipping point. Everybody will have their different way of seeing something. The perception that they feel is difficult for us as parents, difficult for us as facilitators to be able to put ourselves in their shoes. So we ask them questions. We help them make personalized judgments. We enable them to challenge themselves by choice. We use tasks with progressive difficulty, but we vary the choices. We compare able learners with beginners. We have buddy systems. There are all sorts of things to make sure that everybody feels included within these experiences and activities. The environment is key. Obviously, nature, natural places deliver unique qualities that enable children to readjust their behaviours. Adventurous spaces naturally are unpredictable. The activities I usually give young people a broader perspective on their life. There are all sorts of things that combine active, fun-based and thrilling experiences with experiences that might be restorative. So things like mindfulness, relaxation, observing wildlife, forest bathing. All these things are essential within natural spaces. And the fact that, we've got this idea of a nature deficit within children and young people today is quite alarming. That some people struggle to identify different species of bird, that they're not in tune with their local communities. Even in urban environments, in parks and gardens, in school grounds, there is the ability to work and immerse yourself within natural spaces that are really important for developmental mental health and growth. We know that it works. Just get out there and get immersed in it. And it doesn't have to be the summer. It doesn't have to be light nights. There is something to behold within in weather that is very, very testing, but we come through it with flying colours. The naturalness of the outdoors, the fact that it gives us realistic consequences for what we do, again, is something that we need to be really mindful of. That we don't jump in, give away the answers, allow young people to explore, allow them to get lost, allow them not to wear the correct clothing sometimes. It helps them to see the bigger picture. It takes stock of facts, and that they need to work with others for whatever challenges come along. If you jump in too early, if you're overprotective, we've got this notion of cotton wool children or overprotected young people. We need to make sure, obviously, that they're safe, but we also need to make sure that they're able to expand their capabilities in uncertain situations. Otherwise, when things come along, they will struggle to actually find their toolkit that they need to be able to deal with something that they don't expect. And that might come in the form of exam preparation. It might come in the form of being able to take on new responsibilities within other areas of their life. Control. Give children choices and the freedom to play. Yes, we need freedom within some limits, obviously, but we need to be have experience that are empowering, teaches personal responsibility, and it helps them to distinguish between their world and other people's worlds. And what they're doing within their own context of learning and taking responsibility for it. It's really important that we develop this idea of self-determination. Self-determination as a concept involves our autonomy, our individuality, our competence, our capability to take on new tasks and deal with them and work with them, and our relatedness, our ability to connect with other people. So when we become self-determined, we also, should I say, develop those three things. And that makes us more motivated to do things for ourselves in the future. And lastly, emotions. Probably one of the most important things that I would suggest the outdoors brings. And as I've said earlier on about this idea of this notion of having support and having really positive emotional experiences, but also feeling unstable in the moment. So we've got this idea of joy and excitement and exhilaration, but we also need this idea of what we consider to be a stealing effect. This idea that feeling uncomfortable is okay, feeling nervous is okay, feeling nervous for exams is okay, because what it's doing is preparing ourselves for the challenge that we're going to face. And it's actually a good feeling. It might feel uncomfortable in the moment, but once we get through that, once we overcome challenges with support through others, it makes all of that effort, all of that I suppose fear in some respects really worthwhile. So when we talk about this idea of the 3-to-1, I think that's really important that you might remember that. So when giving feedback, for example, it's not always about overpraising and everything's wonderful and everything's amazing and we need to boost your self-esteem by just giving positivity beyond positivity. We're just promoting something there that might not be realistic. It might not actually be real. It might actually inflate complacency. And so we need to be reasoned within the feedback that we give. So just to sort of finish off now, because I think I've been wibbling on for that long. I'm boring myself. I'm only joking. We need to think about some of these concepts and ideas. And what I didn't want to do is, and I hope I haven't, is just push too much your way. This idea of resilience, I think, is really important in order to build really positive young people that can overcome mental health and well-being, can be physically active, can work and be collaborative with others, with parents, with teachers, with young people of their own age, with young people of different age groups, that they have the confidence to be able to believe in their own abilities, that they have the skill sets to be able to enter adulthood eventually. And starting young is really important, and making sure that we develop capabilities that can help us build this capacity, this pushing out into a stretch area that is something that we naturally do as a natural sort of consequence of our development, and that we don't shy away. Shrinking into a small comfort zone will just stagnate us. It will shrink us. It will prevent us from undertaking things that we will miss out on, and that we will think, oh my God, why didn't I ever try that? And sometime in the future, we don't want regretful young people. We want them feeling fulfilled, transformed, and fulfilling their potential. So we can do this even at home. We can build activities, we can build challenges, we can build things like obstacle courses, imagination games. We can create lots of different indoor or garden-based activities. Even within the indoors, we can create something that will enable that behavior to start manifesting itself early. We know that building these building blocks early on in life are the things that we will rely on later. I keep talking about this idea of the brain growing, but once we get it developed, the brain never stops developing. We now know through neuroscience that something called neuroplasticity. The brain and the developmental capability of the brain never stops. It continues right into old age. And that's why we're now doing quite a lot of work with green exercise, with older people that are suffering from sort of mental fatigue or Alzheimer's or some of these sort of disorders that afflict us in old age. Older children, indoor camping, outdoor camping, get them camping in the garden, escape room type puzzles, all sorts of things that could build and test out and challenge. And these challenges can be cognitive, thinking challenges, problem solving challenges. They can be physical, they can be emotional, they can be social. So think of those 4 areas that underpin our holistic development: how we think, how we feel, how we act, and how we interact. Build gradually when we're in the outdoors. Treasure hunts are fantastic. Walking with the family, exploring the outdoors, exploring the local community. Forest schools now are on the increase, massively on the increase now. Quite a lot of opportunities now to get out and start doing some orienteering with national governing bodies. Den building, basic survival skills. Create environments that will enable young people to understand how nature, how uncertainty, how challenge will push their boundaries into areas they never thought were capable. And this will eventually build their independence. It will start enabling them to start becoming self-determined, enabling them to take responsibility, packing bags, looking at, making mistakes. It's okay. Cooking, preparing meals together, taking ownership and responsibility for their own pocket money, planning days out, helping to navigate journeys. I mean, I know we're talking about different generations here, but most of the learning that I have done and worked with my students when I worked in higher education and worked building developmental programs for young people was all about empowerment. It was all about small, what we call micro adventures. They don't have to be climbing the West Ridge of Everest. The West Ridge of Everest is actually in the backyard for some young children. And enabling this capability is also understanding that there are providers out there can help you. There are a whole range of different organizations, national governing body awards, different organizations, local authorities, trusted providers that can help you promote this behavior within your own school environment, in your own community. Make sure, and I know PGL has always been seen, the organisation I head up in terms of impact, has always been seen as a reliable, safe, inclusive practitioner. And that has always been the mainstay of what we've done. And that will enable people to think that when they send their children to a trusted provider, that they're going to be safe. We still encourage experiential learning. We still want to push young people into areas that are unfamiliar to them, and that even just staying overnight is a huge experience for young people if they've never done it before. So, summer holidays at PGL, we have a whole host of different areas and practivity. We have 16 different centres across the UK. We run what was called a REACH programme at the moment, where we've got specific activities that will be designed to meet the age-appropriate needs of children in primary, all the way, I think I mentioned it earlier, all the way through to late secondary school children. But we also have what we call our, and our mainstay at the moment is our multi-activity programs. We have family adventures. We have lots of different activities taking place where families can come and take part in activities with their children. These are all inclusive breaks that mean that you've got all the meals sorted. You've got a whole range of inclusive activities. Everything's included in what we do. You can probably tell that I'm not the best salesperson in the world, but I would encourage, if you have got any inclination in terms of what PGL is about, is that we are now and always have been the biggest adventure education provider, but we are now looking at more inclusive, more educational programs that have that lasting effect.
I think we have one question coming from Marcella. What if the child is very reluctant to try again and an activity that they mistakenly feel they will just fail again because of their confidence?
Again, it's the same as the shyness thing, really. It's this. You're not going to be judged. Failing's normal. Everyone fails. The best inventions in history, like the web, was built because people persevered. Perseverance and effort is everything. Don't look at other people, like you mentioned earlier on. This idea of achievement is about steps in your line. It's a linear thing. It's not looking sideways, it's looking forwards. And it's those small little steps that you can undertake. And if you trip, if you fall along the way, it's actually a good thing. If you wiggle and you wobble, that's fine. Because by wiggling and wobbling, we're building new neural pathways. Because what happens when our brain grows and when we develop new pathways, they prune themselves. So when we fail, it sort of stops and then grows stronger. It's like it's like if you were what gardeners do when they chop something down for it and able to grow again. It builds that strong capacity. So perseverance and effort it's more important by failing and by persevering than it is the end product. The end product is really probably not that important. It's the effort so praising that, rewarding that, encouraging that, modeling that. Model that, make sure that role models are actually performing in that way. And I don't mean you intentionally trip yourself up or anything, but it's about that, we get wet sometimes. This happen. This reluctancy is natural. That nervousness is natural. And I know more than ever before, we've got a whole generation of young people that may feel like this because of all sorts of issues like post-COVID young people, issues where things have been out of their control. Giving them control can actually be the best thing to do because you're giving them that capacity to make their own choices and make the right choices with that support.
Thank you. I think that's really important, kind of the modelling piece. And I've been to a lot of these kind of webinars now. And one of the things that sticks with me is that the family culture that you create as well, which is what you're saying, and that kind of celebrating failure, and talking about failure, and just saying actually encouraging it, because obviously it means that you're moving towards more learning or succeeding in something. The more you try something, and I think
you've grown a new neural pathway. The path you don't go down now. You go down this other one, and if that's not there, you go down another one. That's how we learn. We learn by making choices and usually making the wrong choices.
Yes. Thank you so much. So it is 8:32. I know people will be wanting to get back to their evenings, but just to say a thank you again for joining us, to everyone here, and a thank you to you, Dr. John Allan, for sharing your expertise. From all of us at Parent Kind, we wish you and your children a happy summer break.